All
Sorry.
right, thank you, Rasan. Yeah, we had some issues with the internet connection yesterday. I'm
Yeah, no
so
problem.
happy to be able to talk to this group of women leaders about how to become a thought leader in pharma. I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry since the early 1980s, and I started at the bottom as a hospital nurse at the Duke University Comprehensive Cancer Center. I worked for the chief of surgical oncology, and today I own I'm the Pharmacon LLC is the largest employer in Middle Georgia. We are a niche contract research organization, and we supplement many of the large, small, and medium-sized contract research organizations globally. And as of next week, we will be expanding an entire new subsidiary into decentralized clinical trials. So this is in New York City. I finally got my picture on that billboard in Times Square. So I thought that was the ultimate day in my career, but I was wrong. As I looked back over the last 30 years of working in pharma, I had to decide, how did I get where I'm at? And the reason that I went into pharma from being a hospital nurse was because financially I could not support my young children on the salary that I was making as a nurse at a hospital at Duke University. I was making $5 an hour, and I had 3 small children to support. So I couldn't even go to the grocery store every week and buy groceries. One of the doctors at Duke, one of the oncologists, left and went to work for a company called Glaxo Inc. That was the original UK-based Glaxo. They're still based there now. GlaxoSmithKline, unless there's been a merger that I have not heard from again. So my first job in pharma was with Glaxo Inc. Next slide. The percentage of women CEOs in 2020, and this is from a Forbes article that I found, women held 7.4% of Fortune 500 companies' CEO roles. My company is privately held. I've had numerous offers over the last 10 years for purchase acquisitions, but as long as we are privately held, we're able to control and have a very positive work environment for people. We're able to control salaries, the benefits, time off people get, and practice and have created an environment of inclusion and diversity. When I first started my journey in pharma, I had no idea that I would go on and begin a company as an entrepreneur. I remember my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Jennings, handed me some charts to take to the principal's office at school one day, and she goes, "Don't read the comments on the back of your record." Well, of course, as a 3rd grader, the first thing I'm going to do is turn that record over and read it. My 1st grade teacher had written, her summer at the end of the year was, "I was very bossy." Well, guess where Miss Bossy is now? She is somebody's boss, but I think I'm a very good boss. Next slide, please. Where do you want to be professionally? I think this is something that during your career, you need to reassess from time to time. I look at it every day. When we decided to expand into decentralized clinical trials, this is new territory. FDA has bought into it approximately 3 years ago, and it's a global initiative to simplify clinical trials. Well, how do you decide where you want to be? I think our previous speaker, Dr. Shaw, had some great points, and a lot of them are going to cross over into what I'm going to talk about. You need to assess your unique strengths. What makes you stand out as an entrepreneurial you? Some people may be very happy working as an employee at a company and not want to take that risk to step out on their own. And if that's where your comfort zone is, then you need to work on your personal development within that corporate environment. Once you decide that you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to learn everything that you can, everywhere that you are, and every day that you are working. You need to develop a compelling personal brand and ensure that others recognize the powerful contribution that you can make. When I first went to work for Glaxo Inc., I was an entry-level clinical research associate. Well, that was a very entry-level position. Sometimes I was asked to file documents in the trial master file. And, 30 years ago, at a pharmaceutical company, these were paper documents. They were original 1572 forms being submitted to the FDA at that time every 30 days. According to Forbes magazine, a great reminder of how anyone can be anywhere you want if you're willing to put in the work. Well, In the years I was at Glaxo Inc., I had a very good boss for one duration of time, and then the next boss I got was a very lazy boss. So I learned more from the lazy boss because she would hand me the work from her desk and say, "Oh, Gail, can you do this?" It was reviewing contractor invoices and contractor expense reports and drafting letters, going to the Food and Drug Administration. And at that time, helping prepare the manual submissions. So from the lazy boss, I learned my regulatory foundation, and I learned that I absolutely loved working in regulatory and the clinical trial process. I knew that I had hit a home run when I followed that oncologist to work at Glaxo Inc. And the first studies that I worked on at Glaxo, it was their Zantac NDA. And I remember the day that they drove 4 U-Haul trucks from that Glaxo campus in the Research Triangle Park because the regulatory director was driving one of those trucks. They actually had off-duty police officers, one in each truck, with all the documents that were being driven up by Glaxo Inc. regulatory personnel. Well, that was my first NDA that I worked on. So that was in the days when you stamped the pages and you counted all the pages in the submission. It was a massive undertaking, and I hated it. I hated stamping pages with a red stamp and making sure they were all there. But I learned something more. Next slide, please. You have to show up as your true, authentic self. I live in the South, and I have a Southern drawl. Even when I'm speaking another language, I still have a Southern drawl. Well, as a thought leader, you were born to be different, and you probably knew at a very early age, just like I did when my first grade teacher wrote as her comment at the end of the school year, "She's bossy." Well, maybe I was bossy. I also had 3 sisters and a brother that I had to boss around at home as the oldest. So whatever shows up and makes you unique is part of who you are as an individual. Down south, the word y'all is very encompassing and it's friendly. So, hey, y'all, it's just the way I talk. So when you learn that you're born to be different, your destiny, dreams, and ideas begin to live within you. They can't live outside you if they don't take life within you. Next slide, please. You have to define your authenticity. There's a writer here in the US. Her name is Dorie Clark. I do not know her personally, but I absolutely love her books. You can find them on Amazon. They're probably also available on Kindle. She does a lot of videos and things. You can find her active on LinkedIn. So this is a wonderful person. I think she's probably, I don't know, she's even 40 years old. She's much younger than I am. She's quite a good writer, on staff at the Harvard Business School and Duke University Fuqua School of Business. To define your authenticity, you have to define your brand. What is it that you're going to do, and how are you going to market it? You have to imagine your future. And when I say imagine your future, you need to imagine, are you going to work from home? Is it just going to be you and your company? Are you going to have employees? What's your ultimate goal? My goal was to be able to feed my kids and go to the grocery store every week and not have to worry about whether I had enough money to buy the groceries and diapers that my children needed. You need to reinvent yourself, and this is an ongoing process during your career. People think, oh, once you start out, this is where I'm at. Well, certainly my company today, the PharmaKon, is not what it was when we started in 1996. It was just me then, and today we have 141 employees. We're the largest employer in Middle Georgia. I have hired a business coach every year for the last 5 years. I work one-on-one with somebody to define who I am, to set business goals. And you may not have the money early on in your career to hire someone. My goal has been to expand the company's revenue and to expand the subsidiary and decide what direction I wanted to go in. Develop a vision board. This is something you'll often hear from the movie and book The Secret, the law of attraction. Well, I can assure you that law of attraction, what you think in your head is what's put out into the universe. So having positive thoughts, seeing in front of you where you want to be. What kind of house do you want to live in? What kind of car do you want to drive? How many children do you want? Is there a place you want to travel? If you want to go see the Parthenon in Athens, put that picture on your vision board. Mine was to go to Hawaii. So finally, 10 years ago, we made a trip to Hawaii and stayed for 2 weeks. And imagine your future. If you're happy working within a company, decide how high up you want to go. Do you want to be a director? Do you want to be a vice president? If you're an entrepreneur, which many of us in this room probably are at this point in our careers, I had to imagine the future and decide if I was ready to accept responsibility as an employer, to be responsible for continuing to bring in business to be able to provide people with salaries and benefits. That's a lot of responsibility for continued business development. You have to become a legal entity in the region that you live in. You have to learn all about taxes. And let me tell you, the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, they love taxes. I have a tax accountant and one tax attorney, and that's all they do, or bookkeeping, payroll, and taxes on a quarterly basis. So you're going to become an expert in so many different fields as an entrepreneur that as you grow, you're going to continuously reinvent yourself. It doesn't mean you're going to get rid of what you're doing. It means you're going to expand it, define it, and make it something that's more marketable. Next slide, please. Well, what makes you a thought leader? Well, thought leaders are people, not companies. In my expertise in patient advocacy and healthcare policy, create awareness and change. I assisted with contributions to President Joe Biden's political campaign. Actually, I'm a registered Republican, and our current President Biden is a Democrat. I helped contribute to some of the talks that were given during that campaign trail. Changes are created through people's lives by entrepreneurs and the businesses that we run. My patient advocacy practice, that's part of PharmaKon360, allows people to heal and move on with their lives. Many of these people come to my office they can't find a physician to treat a rare illness, or maybe they need to move to another state and move their entire medical care. As an advocate, I am disrupting America's healthcare system and increasing awareness today. Thought leaders are people with messages that need to be heard in your region of the country, and probably messages that need to be heard globally. Next slide, please. You have to be willing to put in the work if you want to become a thought leader and an entrepreneur. I just completed a very competitive program that Merck Pharmaceuticals did in conjunction with Drexel University, where over 4 months we spent learning all the ins and outs of becoming better, diverse suppliers. This was everything from marketing, finance, and then a final capstone that was a 2-day, it was 10 hours a day for 2 days, and we in breakout groups. And of 120 businesses, all that were US based, they only accepted 16 CEOs. So it was very competitive, and I just finished that the 15th of June. In your country and region, you should look for opportunities. If you're a minority business in the US, these are 2 certifications that I've completed all the criteria for and have to redo it annually. One is a certified women's business enterprise, and then another is a woman-owned business, which allows me to enter the federal government contract market to compete on federal government opportunities. Most pharmaceutical companies want to see that you're a diverse supplier. And what do you bring to the table to offer them for their inclusion and diversity? We have not pitched to a pharmaceutical company yet that did not have a dedicated procurement division, as well as people who were looking to make sure that the pharma company was practicing inclusion and diversity with vendors that they were selecting. Next slide, please. Learn to book yourself on television. Television's global, and let me tell you, if I've learned to book myself on TV, you can learn to book yourself on TV as well. I've been on top 10 networks in the US, Fox Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Chicago. These are just 2 of the sets. Television television stations love food. If you can cook, and you call up the producer, this is Super Bowl here in the US. That's a big deal in early January every year. I do not watch football, and I'm lucky that one of my sons is a chef. But when I pitched that Super Bowl TV segment to that TV station, they couldn't get us in there fast enough. So pick something that's niche to your market that you're an expert on, and call up your local TV producers and ask them, do you have morning news guests? In the US, that's the easiest time to get booked. I've had invitations, C-SPAN Washington, and recently from CNN. Next slide, please. Become a keynote speaker. Our friends at United Biopharma conferences, we are very blessed to have the opportunity to learn to speak. And I started speaking at public events about 5 years ago. And these are not investigator meetings. These are private events like this. It may be Drug Information Associates. It may be an oncology conference, but I'm often invited to come and speak. And this actually was in Boston at the Harvard Club of Boston. And this one on the right was at NASDAQ in New York. Next slide, please. Develop relationships with news authorities. There are newspapers in every city around the globe, and those news reporters are looking for experts to contribute to the stories that they're writing. Here in the US, you can subscribe to a website. It's called Help a Reporter Out. You pay, I think the fee I pay is $19 a month, and 3 times a day, and I do not go through this. I have a publicist that goes through it to look for appropriate opportunities. There are reporters, journalists, looking for someone to contribute to articles that they're writing. So if you want to get in front of the media, you have to start putting your name in front of people. This is how you become a subject matter expert. Next slide, please. Write a book. I have an international bestseller. This is most certainly Conquering Grief from Your Own Front Porch. This is not about pharmaceuticals. This is about how everybody grieves. And during the pandemic, over the last 16 months, I've sold more of these books than I sold since it was first published in 2015. I have a series of 16 children's books about grief. Once you write a book, and I do not have a publisher, I wrote and self-published all of these on Amazon. I hired the illustrator. I've actually done the front covers myself for the Conquering Grief. I wrote the book. I hired somebody to edit it. And you can self-publish anything on Amazon globally. So if you sit around and wait for a publisher, you may never find one. I sat around and I probably spent $10,000 trying to pitch myself to a publishing company. Finally, one day I got smart. I just wrote the book and published it. Now I have people coming to me. Next slide, please. Start a weekly podcast. This is something you can do from your office, and you can do it from anywhere in the world. All you need is internet access. My podcast, Healthcare 911, airs weekly. And you'll find us on the air at 2 p.m. every Friday. It airs live on Facebook, and it airs live on YouTube. So if you don't have a YouTube channel, you're going to want a YouTube channel as well. People need to be able to type your name in on Google and find you once you've defined your message and you are carrying it out into the world. Healthcare 911 is also available on all podcasts, iHeartRadio, Apple, all the podcast platforms. And this is into the 5th month. I interview a lot of pharma, doctors. And this week on Friday, I have 2 patients coming on. One is in need of a kidney transplant. His doctors in Mobile, Alabama sent him home to die last week. They called my office, got me on the phone. And I said, oh no, we'll find you a state in the US with a shorter transplant list. We've already found temporary housing for them, and they're moving their medical care to a city in Texas. The other patient is a survivor, the only survivor of a family. The rest of the family members died to COVID. This lady's from San Antonio, Texas. So she's going to talk about the doctors are going to take her off of life support to die because they needed the ventilator early on in the pandemic. And she knew it wasn't her time to go. So she's going to talk about being in a medically induced coma and hearing everything this doctor was talking about because he was going to take her off that ventilator. So decide what your podcast is. It should be related back to what it is that you're doing. And I think our healthcare system, now this is in the US that my expertise lies, it's a 911. It is a hot mess, as we say down south, and we're going to change healthcare here one patient at a time. Next slide, please. How's a thought leader different than a typical leader? I had to think about that for a while, but a thought leader is somebody that looks at the future and sets a course for it that others will follow. You are a disruptor. And you know, you don't want to disrupt your office flow, but if you've got a great idea and you're on staff at a company and you can improve a process, you need to let somebody know about it and communicate it through the appropriate chains of command. Many of the things that I implemented when I first set up my business were things that I saw that could be improved in companies, and nobody wanted to listen. So I said, oh, hey, I'm going to take this message with me. And you know what? It works. Thought leaders live their opinions through their actions and words. You're going to get up early every morning. I'm up every day, 7 days a week between 4 and 5 a.m. I write, I answer queries, I may email new business development contacts back. Thought leaders are constantly moving toward the future and not lying hidden in the trenches. You're going to put yourself out there. You're going to have enough confidence in your ideas and what your values are and how you know it's going to bring changes in pharma, that you're going to live this 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You're going to create an energy for process flow and improvements. You're going to raise the standard. Next slide, please. Typical leaders, and being a typical leader is good. We all need leaders. We need project managers. We need project directors that want to stay in that business flow. And a typical leader follows the rules and the policies that are in place. A typical leader also organizes and implements strategies to follow a process flow that's already in place. What would happen with our regulatory authorities globally if we didn't have thought leaders on advisory committee panels so that we could change the approval processes? For example, for gene therapy drugs, for the COVID vaccines, those were approved under emergency approvals here in the US, and I'm sure they have been globally. So if we didn't have subject matter experts and thought leaders on these committees, the COVID vaccines would not have been approved as quickly as they were. This is just an example of thought leaders infiltrating pharma and bringing change about when it's needed. Next slide, please. Influencers join a movement. A thought leader creates new movements that result in change. And for women, this is particularly important because of the low percentage of women that are CEOs of companies globally. Nothing happens until business influencers join the movement, such as this conference. Every person here is a business influencer. And a thought leader creates the movements and influencers lead the march. You're going to take knowledge that you gained today from this conference and you're going to go back into your favorite part of the world and you're going to implement a movement. And it may be for yourself to start a business. Next slide, please. Benefits of becoming a thought leader. Well, why do you want to do all this work? Because let me tell you, it's a lot of work to own a company and to manage employees and taxes and regulatory regulations globally if you're running global clinical trials. Well, becoming a keynote speaker, there's a benefit. Invest the time to promote yourself through speaking and writing for publications. I have met some of the most wonderful thought leaders in the world at speaking events. Hiring a business coach. You know what? Let that coach help you try on new shoes. And if you already own a business, annual cost for hiring a professional coach is from $20,000 to $50,000 US annually. It depends on that person's expertise. Learn to get in front of a camera. Become comfortable, talking on Zoom. I probably look a lot cuter in person than I do on this Zoom camera. But you know what? Learn to become comfortable on camera. Book yourself on television. Hire a producer and create YouTube videos. Make your content professional. Keep it where, don't go on TikTok and start. I found one last week on my phone. It's not one of my employees, but I sent it to one of my clients and I said, you probably want to take this down before your pharma client sees it. This was one of their very young project managers with a very inappropriate TikTok account. So somebody's going to see it. So keep your social media professional. But it's okay to put yourself out there. If you're an advocate, have a child with an illness, start a TikTok about your child's journey. I had a son that had a feeding tube until he was 18. We didn't have TikTok 25 years ago, so that wasn't a way for me to get people familiar with my son. But today it would be. So keep it professional and just remember, somebody's always watching. Next slide, please. Thought leadership creates new business opportunities. Well, as a keynote speaker, people are going to ask you for your business card. I generally don't travel with business cards anymore. If you go to Google and type in my name, Gail Trauco, you're going to find me on the top 10 pages of Google. My name's going to dominate that because for the last 6 years, I've had a PR team as well as myself work at putting me first and foremost as a thought leader. Patient engagement in clinical trials. We want this to change. We want to increase patient engagement and inclusion and diversity. So what am I going to do? I'm expanding a subsidiary of the PharmaKonLLC into decentralized clinical trials. We'll start with the US first, but we will also be looking to expand with partners globally. Life management advocacy services. Most patients that come into the business cannot afford, for one reason or another, to pay for advocacy services. That's okay. I have revenue that comes in from the pharma business, and we take them in as a client. For example, the patient that needs a kidney. We've already found 3 different cities in Texas with transplant lists that are 10 months or less. Publication. Put your thoughts out in the universe to become that thought leader. I developed an online course 2 years ago called Medical Bill 911. You can develop an online course. Don't go pay somebody to do it for you. It cost about $6,000 to develop this course because it's videos. I hired an animation company and I wrote all the scripts. I also wrote the book, which is available on Amazon. People in the US need help negotiating medical bills. One of the top reasons for suicide in the United States and bankruptcy are excess medical bills that people can't pay because their insurance policies maxed out or they never had insurance in the first place. It's very, very sad. You want to make sure that you have inclusion as a diversity supplier. I mentioned 3 opportunities. Look in your community and country to see what opportunities are available for women to become certified as a woman-owned business opportunity. Set yourself aside. Pharmaceutical companies want to know what you've done to diversify yourself, and practice inclusion and diversity in your business. We welcome LGBTQ. We have disabled veterans. If somebody's not hired somewhere else in Atlanta that is in pharma, if they're over 45 and they come and apply at my company, and they tell us, and I don't interview everybody because I don't have time. Well, by the time it makes it to my desk and they're looking to make final offers, this is probably the person that's going to get an offer. I have found that hiring anybody that considers themselves a little bit of a misfit, they probably have a talent and they want to be included. And you know what? It was the right philosophy when I started this business, and it continues to be the correct philosophy. We have people that have tattoos all down their neck. These are some of the millennial employees. We have one in the Atlanta office who she's a different hair color every other week. I love it. I can't wear green hair, but she can certainly pull it off. Next slide, please. 5 steps to creating magnetic polarization. This is for you as a thought leader, either in a company as an employee and on your entrepreneurial journey. Travel, get out in the world, experience people, places, and cultures. Every city has an airport, and travel again. I don't know that every country is open. The pandemic has been very hard. I am a traveler. I travel globally and I speak at meetings globally. Be the jewel. Live your philosophy so that others can see your example. Public speaking. Accept and create public speaking opportunities that put you in front of other people. I used to be nervous when I stood up in front of a group of people. And why was I nervous? It's because I have a Southern drawl. Well, when I speak Spanish, I give a lot of talks in the Spanish language. I'm not nervous anymore. They understand my Spanish even with a Southern drawl. And it's what makes me unique and authentic. Write a book. Invest the time and money to write a book on your expert topic. And maybe this isn't in pharma. Maybe maybe you have a hobby that you're an expert at. Maybe something with pets or gardening or cooking. Maybe you've learned how to be an expert at managing something with your children. Write about it. You can self-publish it on Amazon. Be authentic. Show up as your true authentic self. Don't try to be somebody that you're not, and own your destiny, dreams, and ideas, because it's up to you to be the success. Next slide, please. Thrive and avoid burnout. Well, as I work 7 days a week, even on religious days, I answer calls from clients. If a pharmaceutical company calls me, I'm going to answer my cell phone unless I'm in a church service. It's all about which way you look. Well, what do I mean by that? How do you look on the experiences that you're having? I could have had a negative outlook on my first grade teacher that said I was bossy at the end of the year, or I took that and decided my third grade teacher was probably my favorite teacher because she trusted me with the records for myself and others to take it to the office. And it gave me a glimpse into what my first and second grade teacher thought about me as a student. Well, of course, I was a very good student. Most of us on this call probably were to get where we are today. And you need to develop an attitude of gratitude. Be grateful that, that you wake up every day, that you're healthy. I'm always grateful for my children. Oh, raising three sons, and I have a set of twins. Today they're 29. One of them lives in Guatemala. He works for a non-government organization. I have one son that's a chef and one son that is an engineer. He's a computer engineer, whatever that translates to in the computer world. So I'm also very grateful to have the opportunity to speak to people and to meet people. I love the days when I travel. I hear great patient stories. I may even have an Uber driver somewhere that I'm traveling that tells me a great story. Next slide, please. Everybody needs to have a life lesson quote. I love Melissa Gilbert. The universe buries strange jewels deep within us and then stands back to see if we can find them. All of you have an unlocated jewel in your life. You've got something within you that you haven't tapped into. Neil deGrasse Tyson from the Hayden Planetarium in New York is probably one of my favorite speakers that I've heard. He's an astrophysicist. He says that there is a cosmic thread that goes from everything in the universe and every person in the universe to make us the world. So we're connected to anything and everything. So these strange jewels hidden in with all of us, you need to let it shine and you need to find it. So it's okay to feel like you're different. I knew I was different when I was in the 5th grade. I knew that I was going to travel, and I grew up in Foggy Bottom, North Carolina. This is a farming community. We went to church one day a week, and on Sundays in the summer, I rode a bus to school that was not air conditioned, and our schools were not air conditioned. I knew, and you want to know how I knew that I was going to travel and see places in the world? We would have missionaries come to speak at the church, and they would be from, maybe they served a mission in China. Maybe they had served a mission in Africa. Well, I have not yet visited China and Africa, but I knew there was a big world out there, and I was going to see part of it. There was much more outside the state of North Carolina and that farm that I lived on that I knew. I read books. I used books to educate myself about people, places, and things until I was at the point in my career I can go book a flight out of Atlanta now and travel to almost any city in the world direct. Next slide, please. Women are changing the pharma workplace. When I first started working for Glaxo Inc. as an entry-level clinical research associate, they called us salaried employees back then. I don't know. We don't have a word at my company. Everybody's on salary. Nobody punches a time clock. But I was told that I had to wear a suit coat to work every day. Well, I had 3 children, and I couldn't afford to go buy a very expensive suit jacket to have a different one to wear every day of the week. So I went and bought a suit jackets that were machine washable from the local department store. Walmart was where my jackets came from, so I could wash them. By the time I got to the office every day with a set of twins, I had somebody spit up on a diaper or the blanket that I had while I was dropping them off at daycare. So I showed up looking like a mom, but I always had another machine washable jacket in the car to change in. Well, as a young mom working in pharma, I can tell you more than 30 years ago, there was a lot of discrimination in the workplace. I had a boss, my twins had frequent otitis media. They had 4 sets of ear tubes before they were the age of 2. Well, I earned sick leave and I had vacation time. And when a child at daycare here in the US develops a fever of 101, the parent has to come and pick them up. And then, of course, I had to take them to the doctor. Well, I remember my boss saying one day, we were working on a regulatory submission, Gail, don't you have somebody else to do that? And I looked at her and I said, you knew I was a single mom when you hired me. So this is for all the single parents out there. It's much better in the workplace now than it was when I started in pharma 30 years ago. Remind them, and I'm so happy for parents now having the opportunity to work remotely. You know, you can turn that camera off and turn around and deal with these kids coming into your office doing their schoolwork. So just remember, there were pioneers ahead of you helping lay the groundwork for where inclusion and diversity are today. And I don't mind telling you that I was one of those pioneers and probably still am. We do not have parents when they have to go home from work, they don't have to use vacation or sick leave to cover those hours they're out of the office. They're going to get paid for that full work day. Eliminating ageism. I was on a call with a global CRO last week, and I just about fell off the chair that I was sitting on when I heard the project manager say, "Who is that old doctor on this study?" And I thought to myself, well, that old doctor is a world thought leader, and she's 88 years old, and she's the chairman of the department at the university she's affiliated with. And this old doctor is someone that I greatly respect. So I decided, well, what do I do? You know, I almost thought about contacting the company to end the contract because ageism is not practiced in my business, and it should be not practiced anywhere. The workforce should be inclusive, and diversity is where you bring all that expertise to the table. Younger individuals entering the pharmaceutical company and entering the pharmaceutical industry, middle-aged people who may have 10 plus years experience, and to have the opportunity to work with the chairman of the department who's 88 years old and been practicing medicine and still does every day, even in the pandemic, I consider it a privilege. So I called up their director and I said, you know, you've got a problem in your business environment. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, ageism was experienced on your call today. So hopefully he will take that back as a constructive criticism to the project manager who made that comment and help her understand the benefits of inclusion and diversity in the workplace. There's an improved work environment for parents, and I think I just touched on this. LGBTQ. We have 3 transgender nurses on the payroll at my office. They travel and they dress the gender that they are transitioning to. I have no problem with it. And we want everybody to feel like they are accepted. So this in some cities, if I hear any discrimination for these transgenders going into a workplace, we do not send them back. Somebody else takes it and we find another appropriate assignment for them. So it's learning to change the mindset and understanding that this is a global change that's happening, and women in pharma need to have all these values. And for some people, and for me 30 years ago, I would never have said to anybody, oh, I have transgenders that work for me. Well, guess what? These are 3 of the hardest working nurses that we have on staff. Next slide, please. Who am I? You've got to sit back and decide who you are, because this is a question you're going to ask yourself every day. This is a quote that I gave to my Merck colleagues that was sent out in one of their press releases about why I wanted to participate in the Merck Drexel their program for diverse suppliers. The bottom line is I wanted to grow revenue to the company to $20 million. Well, guess what has come to fruition in 2021, even with the pandemic? We will hit $20 million in revenue by December 31st, even with things that have changed. We've managed to create and will continue to refine and create an inclusive and diverse work teams. And when I say teams, it goes from the clinical trial assistant. We don't have a switchboard. We have an electronic directory, and it's going to ring to that office. Everybody has a cell phone. If, you know, you can reach them by email, you can reach them by telephone. We certainly are using Zoom and Skype and WebEx for many meetings. And I do ask people to turn their cameras on. You don't have to be dressed up every day, but let people see that you're present. You need that energy by connecting with other people. And the other thing that I'm still very proud of is the fact that people that may consider them a misfit in another corporate environment are generally very happy. The 3 transgenders told me, you know, years ago, one of them's been on staff for 5 years now, as he's transitioning into a female. that he always felt like he was a misfit, and he doesn't feel that way anymore. If I can have someone who is transitioning tell me that they feel like they are included in the work environment, I think as a boss that I have done my job. So for you other ladies, and I hope this is an inspiration to you, ask who you are, and you're going to be a different person 5 years from now. 25 years from now, you're going to look back at your accomplishments and keep a record of it. Keep a record of all the articles that you have published. Start a media resume on that YouTube channel. Buy those TV clips and have them uploaded. It's a permanent archive. So for people who are leaders in pharma, I hope that you're all inspired to go back into your homes and communities and businesses and practice inclusion and diversity, and also continuing personal education. You can never learn enough. So I'd like to thank our colleagues at United Bio Conferences for inviting me to speak today. I'm happy to take any questions. You can all connect with me on LinkedIn. You can type my name in on Google. You'll find the businesses, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And, if you're looking for somebody to teach an inclusion diversity workshop, we have suppliers on staff, ongoing continued education. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the very nice presentation and very educational and valuable career path you have been through. It's very helpful for beginners, especially people who want to go through this field and go into industry and entrepreneur. It's very, very illuminating. Thank you very much for every single word you have given to us.
Thank you, Rasan.
Yeah, please, if you have any question, post it in the chat. And I've prepared also some question. That in the industry field, they always say that you are replaced. You are not permanent there. The boss can change you. You can replace you with another one at any time. And it's a way they always get fear for new people who want to start in the industry. Should I go there? Should I know? I don't want to be replaced sooner or later, So how to secure the position when you go into industry, how to build a position that is stable for you and your boss will not replace you after some time?
Well, if you're entering industry, it's very hard to get entry-level positions with the big global companies like Bayer, Pfizer, Roche, Glaxo. You are going to probably have to go in as a contractor. The contract research organizations are great places to enter the pharmaceutical industry. This could even be study coordinators that want to transition into a position as a clinical research associate. So, when you look at companies, you've got to look at whether or not it's an established company or if it's a startup. Startups are also very risky. If you go to work for a small biotech startup company, they have investment capital. Well, you're going to be very passionate about those clinical trials. But if that drug doesn't work and they stopped, you're going to probably get a phone call one day that was your last day, and you're going to have no notice. But that's okay. There are many, many jobs open in pharma. And it's, becoming an independent contractor was where I first started my business, because I couldn't feed my kids. I couldn't support my family on the salary I was making working at Glaxo. When I left, I was making $29,000 a year. So my first year out as a contractor, I made more than 6 figures. I could feed my children. I could buy the medication they needed. I could pay the health insurance that they needed. So my kids were my motivator. And then I realized I'm good at this. I had a talent for it. I am a regulatory diva. We have direct relationships with the Office of Investigations with the Food and Drug Administration. And it's not being afraid to say that you have a talent and expertise. That's not being conceited. And, continual ongoing education, like the conferences that we've had the opportunity to attend yesterday and today. This is phenomenal education. And you don't have to leave your home to get it. You can I've got 2 more computers in here. I'll be back and forth from one computer to another, while the conferences are going on today. So you got to know that there's a risk taking a job with a startup. And I think the CRO world is a great place to enter the pharma industry. There's high burnout rates in the CRO world because here in the US, some of them require up to 15 days on site a month. Well, there's only 20 working days in a month. So If you're traveling 15 days a month, you better get real. You're not going to be home a lot. Somebody's got to do the laundry. Somebody's got to open the mail. Somebody's got to take care of the dog if you have one. So it's a real hardship, but you have to pay the price and put in the work. My company people, we're only asking them to travel 8 days a month, which is 2 days a week. For myself, when I travel, I take the last flight out of Atlanta to a city on Sunday night. I'm out of the office Monday and Tuesday, and then I'm back in late Tuesday night to Atlanta. And I relocated the business here to Atlanta, Georgia, because this is a global corporate hub for an airline. It will never move, and I can fly to almost any city globally that I need to work at.
Thank you very much for your answer. I also have another question. Like, with the COVID-19 pandemic, the opportunities are becoming less and less. And people who want to start in this field, in the industry field, in the pharma, and it's getting harder to search for such opportunity. Like, do you have any advices for such people to go for a way to search for such opportunity? Or what is the strategy they should follow?
I think the job opportunities have increased. Go to places like look on the websites, Indeed, Glassdoor, do your research on LinkedIn, connect with some recruiters. I get called by recruiters every day and I laugh and I'm going, no, I'm not available to take a job. I'm in a business. So the job opportunities are there. Just use the internet as your resource. And if you've got somebody that you know who is working for a pharma company, email them, call them up on the phone if you have a telephone number. Ask them, are there any open positions with your company? A lot of places now, staffing agencies provide staff globally. I know we recently have had a contract, and we still do, with a global pharma company. One of the project managers was living in Italy and serving a U.S. portion of the company. Certainly he was having to work on U.S.-based time based in Italy. So be creative. It doesn't mean you need to move from where you live, but the opportunities are there. There are more open clinical research associate positions right now than I have ever seen in my career.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation and for the illuminating information that you shared with us. Appreciate your time, your effort, and your knowledge that you shared with us today.
Thank you, Rasan. It was a privilege. And thank you, everyone, for listening and for the wonderful questions.
Sorry for interrupting. We have now a question. Could you please let us know how to overcome the challenges for women in pharmaceutical organizational structure?
Let me tell you, if anybody's ever been discriminated against in pharma, you're looking at her. When I started out in my career. So I think going through the proper channels in a company, and I actually, as you're looking for jobs and you're talking to people, recruiters and human resources, ask them, well, do they have anyone who oversees inclusion and diversity? Ask them what that company's philosophy is. 30 years ago when I entered pharma, this was nothing that was heard of. I was lucky that I got a job in pharma. So, when I went to take maternity leave with my twins, at 36 weeks, my obstetrician wanted me to go on bed rest. So I went to human resources and I said, we have disability with this job as a benefit. She goes, oh, you can't use that for pregnancy. Well, some years after my twins were born, I went back to human resources and I questioned them again. There were other women going out on disability leave. She deliberately informed me incorrectly because she didn't want a female on pregnancy leave on her HR team. So, you're going to have to do some judgment calls, and sometimes you may even need to make a change. If there are too many obstacles in the work environment, it may just be a signal for you that you are growing as an individual, and just be alert and aware. Yes, we all have to take some type of discrimination in the workplace, even though I think it's wrong. I went to Little Rock, Arkansas 4 weeks ago to help, and this is it's a global pharmaceutical company. A clinical research associate was being sent into a hostile work environment. I said, I'll get on the plane. I'll go with him. This man comes in a rage. This doctor's 68 years old. He knows better, and says, oh, I see somebody I know. Oh, hey, Pam Nelson. Anyway, he proceeded to yell at me. I stood up and I opened the conference room door and I said, would you like to continue in this anger of rage? So, you're going to have to learn to be in control. You're going to have to learn to think very quickly. So read everything that you can, know what your values are and who you are as a person. And you're going to have to be strong. And sometimes you're going to have to be bold. It doesn't mean you're going to have to say anything, but you may have to make a difficult decision that it's time to move on to another company.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now, we don't have any more questions. We would like to thank you again, Dr. Gail, for your time and effort. And
thank you, Rasan.
Thank to you always. And now we are very happy